Those who don't know you, could you just give a little bit of background on who you are? And then since we're going to be talking about what you eat in a day, do you mind sharing your age, height, and weight? That way people have kind of a reference point.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Anthony Chaffy. I'm a neurosurgical resident currently practicing in Perth, Australia, though I'm from America. I played professional rugby for 10 years before medical school, and traveled quite extensively with that, and was always interested in Australia. So when I had an opportunity to come down here and practice after I finished doing my humanitarian work in Bangladesh in the refugee camps there, I decided to come down and take it. I've been doing research into diet and nutrition and how that affects the body and chronic disease and athletic performance for probably 24 years now. And have come across the full sort of carnivore lifestyle and advocate for that and live it myself. And now, because I have such a base of knowledge and understanding about it, and I've tried to challenge my knowledge by going to vegan doctors and nutritionists and going to their websites and asking them questions and looking at their arguments, saying, okay, well, am I missing anything? And challenge. And I don't want to be wrong. I just want to know what's going on. I don't care what the answer is as long as it's the answer. And so, I've done that. So now that I have such a base of understanding about it, to the point that I'm happy with it, I'm never going to be slipping off that again. I'm 6'3". I'm about 240 pounds. And just turned 42 a couple of weeks ago in January.
Well, happy belated birthday, and you look great.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
How many meals in a day do you eat then? Because I would think you're pretty busy, so I'm thinking you're sitting down and having one meal, but that would just be like a ton of food. So how many meals are you having, and what size portions of meals?
I often eat once a day. I might have like a bit throughout the day. Like if I'm able to work out, I'll eat more. On an average day, I'll probably eat about 2 pounds of ribeye, and I'll eat that all at once. So it's just like a big, massive steak, possibly two. I always make more than I think I'm going to want, because I want to bring myself to satiety. So I want to eat as much as my body is asking for. I think that's very important, especially when you're working out, because you don't have the same hunger signals when you're on carnivore, when you're just not eating carbohydrates, as you do when you are. And so you have to sort of relearn that. And so one of the ways that I figured out how to do that is just by eating, but by just keep eating until it doesn't taste good. And I found that taste is a very good marker of that. The more your body wants a nutrient, the better it's going to taste. And so when I first start the steak, it tastes just amazing, and it gets less and less good. And then all of a sudden it gets to a point where I just go, oh, I'm not really enjoying this. And so that's how I know I want to stop. I sometimes eat like during the day, like if I'm working out a lot, I might do that twice. So, I'll be just like hungry through the day. I have the cafeteria at my hospital sort of knows my orders by now. So I go and I get like 10 eggs and 6 like long strips of bacon. And that's sort of my midday snack if I feel I need one. But mostly it's like most 2 meals a day, like 2 big meat meals a day.
Okay. Do you, I feel I agree with you when it comes to the taste part, because for me, I don't know, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on organ meats then, but when I first started having liver, I feel like probably I was just deficient in some nutrients, so I really enjoyed the taste. And then after a certain point, I was like, nope, I do not like the taste anymore. So I haven't had it in, like a year now, but that's something that I felt like I was learning just by taste, if that's something that I was missing or something that I'm craving. Do you ever have organ meats, or have you ever experimented with that?
Yeah, I would agree with you. Yeah, if your body's telling you just like, ugh, this isn't tasting good, I think you should listen to that. And specifically with things that are bitter and so forth, like obviously this rolls into like plants and things like that, and them having toxic elements that are bad for you. That's what that bitter taste is. It's your tongue and brain telling you this is bad for you, spit it out. I occasionally eat organ meats. I'm not one of the, I don't think that you need them. I can count on the fingers of one hand how many times I've had liver in the past 20 years. I could count on 2 hands how many I've had in my entire life. And so I don't think you need them. You can have it if you want to, but it's not a requirement. And I think that especially things like liver, which is very nutrient dense, but therein lies the problem, because it has a higher proportion of nutrients such as vitamin A and so forth that that you can handle. So if you think of proportion of liver to skeletal muscle, you think of a cow, how many hundreds of pounds of skeletal muscle does it have to every 1 pound of liver. You know, if you're out hunting and you take down this big animal, the proportion of skeletal muscle to liver is going to be very slight. So you're not going to have much liver to all the skeletal muscle. So having it every now and then is great, but you know, eating it every single day, you can run into problems, I think.
Right. So you don't ever do chicken or lamb or bison or other cuts or other kinds of animals?
Yeah, sometimes I have no problem with them. Like I'll eat any animal, you know, anything that moves and had a face. Like I'm all for it, you know, and even some things that didn't have a face. Like I say the face thing just because some people have problems with shellfish and so forth. And so, you know, but I don't have a problem with shellfish, and so I'll eat that as well. I rarely eat chicken just because it's just not my favorite. And so I generally prefer beef. I buy it in bulk, so I always sort of have it. But yeah, lamb's great. Chicken's fine too. I just I would eat the dark meat with the skin on, you know, because I do want the fat. I generally I try to get between 70 and 80% calories from fat.
Do you ever do fish then? Do you ever do seafood?
Yeah.
Okay, but it's not like a weekly thing or a monthly thing?
No.
It's just sort of whenever I feel like it. You know, I was at Costco the other day and I just saw a salmon. I was like, oh, that looks good. I'll grab some salmon. But you know, 99% of what I eat would be beef.
And do you ever eat your beef raw?
Sometimes, yeah, it's good. You know, when you think about it, you know, we have steak tartare, and we have beef jerky, pemmican. All these things are raw; they're just dried. And so, you know, biltong and so forth is you know, a dried sort of meat that they use. South Africa is great. You know, sushi, like sashimi and things like that, those are all raw. And then you just think about like a rare steak. You know, people say like, oh my God, raw, that sounds gross. A rare steak, the inside of that's what raw steak tastes like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it just has a sear on the outside. People get worried about this because there've been a lot of they made a boogeyman out of raw meat, thinking that, oh, you're going to get parasites, you're going to get you know, bacteria and food poisoning and so forth. Over 97% of the food poisoning cases in America come from produce, generally things like lettuce and things like that. And then the only, you know, food poisoning issues that you get from meat or from food handling after the fact. So you're at a restaurant and someone, you know, didn't wash their hands or something like that. The USDA and any Western country has very strict controls on meat packaging and so forth. You know, they process for 6 hours, and then for 2 hours, they mandatorily have to shut down. They have to bleach the whole place, deep clean, pressure wash everything. And then represented from the USDA, they're there 24 hours a day when they're producing, and they'll test different spots. If they find any contamination, they have to do another 2-hour deep clean. And then they take samples from all the different little, you know, from all the rounds of packaging, and they send those off to the lab for cultures and so forth. It can take a few days. If anything comes back, they pull the entire lot back. So this is very safe stuff. And so, you know, we haven't even had like, you know, even raw pork, you know, we haven't had a single case of trichinosis in the domestic animal population in America in over 20 years, you know. And that's why I say, oh, you know, cook, you know, pork, you know, well done. Actually don't necessarily have to anymore. I'm not telling people to eat it raw, but I'm just saying that we don't have trichinosis as a problem in America. So yeah, I love raw meat. I don't eat it all the time, but you know, sometimes I'll dry steaks and things like that. I'll age them in different ways, and then I'll just be getting ready and I'll just sort of slice them off. I'm like, well, this is good. And I'll just keep eating it. And it's sort of like, you know, wet beef jerky. It's kind of a gross way of putting it, but like it's actually really good.
I don't know if you've ever seen Liver King, but he was chugging 50 raw eggs. So a lot of people started doing that. I don't know what Liver King is up to because I would be running to the bathroom, but do you ever eat raw eggs then?
Sometimes, yeah. I have just basically when I'm in a rush and I want to get something down and I'm just like, okay, I'm hungry. I want to eat. I have no time. I've got to be at the hospital or something to do. I'll just like, you know, crack, you know, 6 or 10 eggs into a big gulp and just gulp it down and then just go. I don't even really mind. I'll add a bit of salt as well sometimes. And I don't really mind the taste. It actually just sort of, funny enough, just tastes like scrambled eggs almost, you know, just, you know, in liquid form. But yeah, I'm certainly not going to try to 50 of them. I don't think that's...
It just take a long time to crack, you know, just take half your day right there.
And how many calories he just threw down and how much protein he just ate in one, I was like, that's crazy. Do you drink coffee?
I don't know. So, my hard rule is no plants, no sugar, nothing artificial, and that goes for sauces, seasonings, and drinks as well. So, coffee, is a plant, and so I don't do that. I more specifically, I don't do that just because when I was sort of back on doing this about 5 years ago, I just wanted to experiment, and so I hadn't had coffee, and I wasn't really a big coffee drinker anyway, but it was like several weeks in, I was feeling amazing. And I just had some like heavy workouts throughout the week. I was just back playing rugby. And so I said, okay, I was out with a friend and they were getting coffee. So I was like, okay, let's see what coffee does. Can I have coffee, or how's this going to affect me? I'd been doing heavy workouts that week, but I wasn't sore. That was something that I noticed when, I was back on doing carnivore. Like I couldn't get sore no matter how hard I worked out. So I ended up like putting this to the test, and I ended up doing like 32 sets of heavy weights, like for leg day, like 12 sets of whatever, and then like 20 sets of squats. And I couldn't wear myself out. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to stop here because it's been 4 hours. Cool. I wasn't sore. I felt great. And then, a day or so after that, when I should be at that, like the peak of my soreness, I was fine. I went out for coffee with a friend. I had 1 cup of black coffee, and within 20 minutes, I could feel my legs getting stiffened up. My back started getting sore. I'm like, oh, okay, what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? And I was sore for 2 full days after that. I was like, that is not worth it. And so that was just from 1 cup of coffee. And so it wasn't really a big loss to me. I never really drank too much coffee anyway, but I specifically avoid it now.
Do you, I see, for me, I sometimes think that I have become more sensitive to other foods when before I used to be able to eat whatever. And of course, when I was eating a standard American diet, you wouldn't know that, oh, the avocado is causing me XYZ because I'm eating pizza and chips and drinking alcohol. And so when you remove those things, then you're like, okay, I can digest avocado as well. I can do apples or whatever. And then when I did carnivore, then I tried reintroducing an avocado and I broke out into a rash. Now, I don't know if that's because avocados are terrible or because I just don't have, my gut wasn't used to having that yet. Do you think that the rash came from plant toxins or from just not being able to digest the foods yet? Since you are the most strict carnivore I have met, I'm just very interested to know what you think.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. I think both of those are correct. I think that happens for 2 reasons. First of all, we can see the contrast now. When you're eating a standard American diet, I describe it as having this baseline level of crap that we feel all the time, and we call that normal, and it is normal to us because that's how we normally feel. And so we just say, okay, this is how I normally feel, and you sort of go up and down based on that, and you can make slight changes. Oh, I feel really good, or blah blah blah. When you get out of that, when you get all these sort of toxic elements out of your body and you're eating optimally and you're giving your body exactly what it wants and nothing that it doesn't want, you feel better than you ever felt in your entire life. And so then when you eat something suboptimal or even harmful, you're going to see that stark contrast, and you're going to be like, oh, well, I'm not doing like me with coffee. So I think, a major point is just that contrast. You can now see what this is doing to you one-on-one. This is a controlled experiment. You've changed one factor, you have one result. The other side, I think, is you're right. You're not used to these sorts of things. Poisons and drugs and alcohol and cigarettes and all these sorts of things, you build up a tolerance to them. And so, you drink and you drink and drink, and now you need more alcohol to get the same drunk and so forth. So you build up tolerances, and you can build up tolerances to other harmful chemicals that don't, get you high or drunk. And then when you get away from that, your body says, oh, okay, now we don't need to expend the energy to build up these defenses against these sort of things because we're not seeing them. And all of a sudden you slam yourself back into that. And now you get the full brunt of that because you haven't sort of been, been building up this resistance. So I think it's both of those. You're seeing a contrast, and you don't have, your body hasn't mounted the same tolerance defense to it.
So it sounds like you don't even take maybe supplements, you don't do electrolytes.
No.
And then you said you don't do seasonings other than salt. So, I mean, like I said, you are the most strict carnivore I have met. How do you know? So a lot of times people ask me, how do you know that you're getting all of the vitamins and minerals your body needs, especially on the weeks or the months or the years where you don't do organ meats? And if you don't do, every day with eggs, and if you don't have every day with more variety, or fish even. I was kind of confused. The fish thing I was surprised about too. So you're just doing mostly red meat all the time. Yeah. And how are you getting all the vitamins and minerals you need?
Yeah, I mean, so it just comes down to If this is our evolved diet, then by definition, it will have everything that we need to live optimally. And it will have no deficiencies. A simple test of this is looking at the Inuits and other people living in the northern reaches that they're up in the Arctic Circle. There are no plants for them to eat. How are they doing it? If you're deficient in one nutrient to 1 degree, you cannot live generationally. You cannot, gestate and grow a fetus inside of you, give birth to that fetus, have that fetus exclusively eat this thing, make more babies and so forth, generation after generation after generation. If you are deficient in one thing, then you look at things like, Herodotus, who is the original Greek historian. He chronicled an interaction between a Persian emissary and the king of Ethiopia. And the king of Ethiopia asked, he's like, okay, what do you your emperor eat, and how long do your people live to? And they, this was early on in the agricultural revolution. And so they described, growing wheat and making bread. And they said, our people would live, about 70 years. This is 3,000 years ago, by the way. And the king of Ethiopia sort of laughed at him and said, like, well, no wonder you live such short lives if you eat dirt. Like our people only eat boiled meat and we only drink the milk of our cattle, and we would live 120 years, sometimes more. That sounds far-fetched, but we know as geneticists for the past 20 years that chromosomally, genetically, humans should be living on average about 120 years. Exactly. And so, that means that if you just stay out of your own way, if you just don't mess up, you should live 120 years without doing anything special. And yet we're dying in our 60s and 70s. And you see that as that first example, in Persia, they're eating a lot of bread and they're living 70 years. And then there's places not eating bread, they're eating, the way we've sort of evolved to eat, they're living 120 years. They're making it to our, genetic average. These other guys are making it to today's average, basically. And that shows you how significant of a detriment these things are. And they say, oh, well, what about your RDAs? And what about this? I mean, those were all, those all came up with, first of all, by a guy named Ansel Keys, who was a known crook and paid shill for the sugar companies. He's put forth a lot of fake studies and so forth, arguing that cholesterol caused heart disease when it's actually sugar. And now we have clear documentation that he was being paid off by the sugar companies to falsify data and publish fraudulent studies. So this guy's I just don't believe a word that comes out of his mouth anyway. But let's say that was legitimate. He was looking at people who were eating a mixed diet. And when you eat a mixed diet, you need a different constellation of nutrients. Vitamin C is a classic example. If you're not eating enough meat, you're not going to get enough collagen. You'll need vitamin C to hydrolyze, proline and lysine in order to, have proper binding collagen. Vitamin C looks like a fructose molecule with a tail on it. So it looks like a carbohydrate with another couple molecules on it. This actually competes for binding sites in your gut with carbohydrates. And so if you're eating carbohydrates, you need to eat a lot more vitamin C in order to absorb that. Then if you have higher blood sugar, this actually opposes vitamin C utilization in your body. So you're hitting yourself twice. So you're going to need a lot more vitamin C just to get any use out of it. And then if you're exclusively eating meat, you're going to already be getting these, collagen and these, hydrolyzed proteins. So you don't actually need the vitamin C for that, right? So it's a very different thing. And so, if you're looking at a carnivore population, the amount of vitamin C that we need is minuscule. Okay. And so, I don't worry about the RDAs. I worry about, hard facts and science. And the fact that, I've been doing this 10 out of the last 20 years and my gums aren't bleeding and I feel amazing, tells me that I really don't actually need to take a vitamin C supplement. And so when I had a friend of mine who's an endocrinologist, when I was talking to him about, carnivore diet and so forth, he was very interested in this because he'd been doing bariatric medicine, weight loss, and preventive medicine for 40 years. And so, all this stuff was really resonating with him. He's like, oh, this is really interesting. And he said, okay, well, you look good. You look like you're in really good shape, but, let's check under the hood. Let's see what your bloods are like. And, he called me a couple of weeks later when the results were back. And, I was confident that they would be fine. So I never took them as I didn't really care because whatever they were, I was confident.
You're a medical doctor and you don't get blood work done. I love it.
No, I don't care. Like, it's like, I mean, it's like, you don't get blood work on a patient unless it's going to, affect your treatment. Do I want, I order this blood test? Is the answer to that going to change something that I do? If it's not, then, why do it? And he called me up a couple of weeks later when all the results were back in, and he said, we should talk about this diet thing over a steak sometime, because results came back and they were really good. So we went through them and we went through all the tests, and he said that, I think I was 38 at the time. He said, for someone your age, if you took 100,000 people off the street, your same age, your blood, and did all their bloods, yours would be number one without a shadow of a doubt. And so we went through each and every one. And so not only were my numbers, my hormone panel, my vitamin panel, all these sorts of different markers, not only were they, optimal for someone my age, most of these were optimal for a healthy male adult at 25. My magnesium and my zinc were sort of in the low normal range, but he said that it was far higher than anyone else in Australia that doesn't take supplements that he's seen. So that's one thing, but I still think that even with the deficiencies of the soil and whatever area that you're in, if you're just eating meat, that you'll be fine.
Do you do grass-fed meat? Is that important to you, or does it matter? 100% grass-fed, I should say.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, even grain finished beef is 80% grass-fed. 80% of their life is on grass. It does make a difference, but I think of it as, the difference between getting gold and silver at the Olympics. Silver didn't beat gold, but they beat everyone else on earth, and that's how I think about with grass-fed versus, grain finished beef. It's not as good as grass-fed, but it's better than anything else you'll ever eat. And so I don't have too much of a problem doing that. When I was in the States, it was easier to sort of source these sorts of things. And so I bought a cow. I went, directly to a farmer, which is the best way to go. It's cheapest. And you support the local farmers. It's good for them. It's good for you. Mm-hmm. And you know exactly what you're getting from whom and so forth. And I sourced a cow that was, grass-fed its whole life. I actually went for an older cow because I'd seen a lot of things that, older cows actually have much, much better flavor, and they do. They're amazing. Oh. And so I asked for a cull cow that they would, they're culling from the herd. And it was actually much cheaper as well. It was about, 2/3 the price of, a yearling, or, something that was 18 months old. So it was cheaper, and oh my God, it tasted so much better. And it was a 10-year-old cow. It was grass-fed its whole life. It had this fresh, almost like citrusy smell to the meat. I was like, oh my God, it was amazing. The fat was like dark yellow. It was absolutely fantastic. And every time I ate it, it actually had not much fat because it was, grass-fed. So it was quite lean. I just felt supercharged every time I ate this stuff. So I definitely think that truly grass-fed, and the thing is, a lot of things will say grass-fed. If the fat is white, it's probably not grass-fed, because when they're eating green grass, the beta carotene, things like that, turns the fat yellow. When we're doing a surgery on people's bodies, fat's yellow. And so, white fat means that they've been, giving them hay or a feedlot or something like that, because that's, just marketability. For some reason, they've decided that white fat looks better. Yellow fat tastes better. And so if you get that yellow fat beef, grass-fed, that's great. Not everybody have access to that, and some people can't afford it because when you're buying it sort of in individual steaks, it can be much more expensive. So just Safeway beef is perfectly fine. I go to Costco because I like buying in bulk, and I love Costco, and so that's what I generally do. Yes, there is a difference, but in comparison to anything else you'll ever eat, it's immaterial. Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor, Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right. Thanks, guys.
Speaking of fat, do you think, like, do you ever use tallow then? Or is there a hierarchy of fats for you? Like, you're like, ghee is the best or butter's the best? Or is there a hierarchy of like the best fats and which ones you use?
I do like tallow. You can get grass-fed tallow, and it's, you know, it's yellow. You know, you get this tub of yellow sort of stuff, and that's how you know it's the good stuff. And I definitely prefer that. But I use ghee. I don't have a problem with ghee and other animal fats just to cook with. And I quite often will, you know, melt butter into my steaks if it's like a leaner steak. Australia has gone, you know, very, very full on low fat. And so I have to, you know, melt butter into steaks sometimes. And so I have no problem with that. Butter tastes amazing. And you know, so I use that. But yeah, I think grass-fed beef tallow would, if you're going to rank them, would be at the top.
And then you said butter and ghee, which I call like byproducts of dairy, but do you ever do dairy yogurts, cheeses, kefir, milk?
Very rarely. And if I were to eat dairy, it's going to be with meat. And so meat's always the meal. Dairy's okay, it's fine, but it's not optimal. And I really like being optimal. I feel better optimal. Dairy, first of all, there's a big difference between raw milk and whole milk, raw milk and pasteurized milk and so forth. And so if I were to get that, I try to get like a raw milk. If I'm going to have milk, I'm going to have a glass of milk every now and then, like every few months or a few weeks or something like that. You know, there's a few times that I maybe wouldn't have had milk that whole year. Yogurt every now and then. Like my brother, when he got on this, he did really well. He lost like, you know, 20 pounds in a month. Was feeling great. And then he's like, well, can you eat dairy? I was like, well, you can, but I would only eat it with meat, you know, melt cheese onto meat or whatever, have a glass of milk occasionally. And I say that very carefully, very specifically to everyone. And everyone always hears, I can eat as much dairy as I want. And they go crazy. And so they're just eating chunks of cheese, and they're just eating like bowls full of yogurt and just drinking gallons of milk. And, you know, my brother was like, what the hell is going on? He gained like the 20 pounds, like right back like that. But, you know, certainly I noticed people that will start drinking a lot more milk and eating a lot more dairy and yogurt. And also have a bit of, you know, skin blotchiness, and they'll have little problems because it's not necessarily something that you want to have every day, certainly.
I'm guessing then your thoughts on like whey protein isolate or protein powders, even if they're the 100% grass-fed beef protein. I know there's one called Prime Protein that's out right now that's like 100% beef of protein powder somehow. Okay. I'm guessing you would think those ones are no-go.
You know, I just don't think you need them,
right.
You know, and you know, if you're eating enough meat, like you don't. So that's first of all. Second of all, most of these things have a lot of crap in them besides the whey protein and the beef protein. They have artificial sweeteners and other sorts of things that I just don't want. And you know, artificial sweeteners have a ton of problems. You know, they can give an insulin response, and they can screw up your metabolism, and just like sugar can. And so that's something that I think people should really avoid as well. It's very hard. You can get some of the like the natural proteins that are just like, you know, I think there's something called like naked protein or whatever, and it's just the whey protein. And if you wanted to, like, fine, you know, but you don't need to, you know, and that's the thing. It is a supplement. You're supplementing your diet. Well, do you need to? Is your diet deficient in anything? If it's not, then you don't need to supplement.
Wow. Yeah, so I have protein powder sometimes, but that's just because fine. I get, sometimes I'm like, okay, more beef. Can I just have a new flavor? I tell people, I say, hey, I'm not promoting protein powder. I'm not saying people should have protein powder. I'm just saying it's convenient for me in the morning. I'm most interested in that. For me, I go to the gym and work out, though you can't tell, because for me, my background, I was a track athlete, so I was a hurdler and a sprinter, and I had more muscle. And then when I started eating more carnivore, I have not been able to gain the same kind of muscle or feel like I have the same kind of pump in the gym without having maybe some carbs. So I talked to Keto Savage Robert Sykes about this, and he was like, that's just because you're not fat adapted, because you go back and forth between having some carbs sometimes and not. So I'm just wondering, for you, do you ever notice a dip in energy?
Yeah. So when I work out, I actually get energy from working out. Biochemically, when well, the reason people take stimulants and things like that, like coffee, like, other sorts of, pre-workout sort of drinks, is to give them that hit of energy, because you feel better when you burn more energy. So this causes you to burn more energy short term, and then it screws you up, but you feel better for that moment. When you're in a carnivore metabolism, when you're looking at, this fed versus fasting metabolism, which I think is completely off. I think that so-called fasting metabolism is our primary metabolic state. That's where all of our heavy machinery comes to bear. And you make carbohydrates, you make glucose, you make glycogen and ketones and so forth. When I start working out, I will produce the amount of energy I need to do whatever my workout is, and I will feel better as a result of that. So I don't need to, drink coffee or take caffeine in order to get energy so I can work out. I go work out so that I can get energy. And so I will produce more energy and I'll feel better. And this will make me want to work out harder, which will make me feel better, which will make me want to work out harder. And so you get this positive feedback, and you just push yourself. And, the thing with as far as the pump is concerned, I just did a post on this, actually, talking about like bodybuilding. They go through this bulking phase where they just eat just tons and tons of carbs and so forth, and they get all bulked up. They get fat, and so, the thing is that when your blood sugar is high, when you eat carbohydrates, your blood sugar goes up. High blood sugar causes direct damage. These glucose molecules actually physically fuse to other molecules. It's called glycation. It damages them or destroys them. And so this actually causes serious harm to your body. This is what kills diabetics. This is why their body just sort of breaks down. So in a defensive mechanism, your body looks at this, goes, what the hell is this person doing? It slams up your insulin to try to get this stuff out of your body as quickly as possible. It's this sort of damage control, hazmat cleanup. And so this is sort of a side note, but this is why people overeat, is because, when you're eating carbohydrates, your insulin goes up, it blocks leptin, your blood sugar is going down. And so your brain gets a signal that you have zero energy reserves and your blood sugar is dropping. So you get this panic signal that says, if you don't eat now, you will die. And this is why people go, I have to eat. But because insulin, forces energy into cells and it doesn't allow it to come out of cells, it really disrupts your whole metabolism. So you're eating all these carbohydrates, and this is just stuffing it into every cell available, into your fat cells, into your muscle cells, into your in forms of glycogen, in forms of fat, and into your liver and so forth. And so it's actually depositing glycogen and fat in your muscles. And so this is where like a marbled steak comes from. Right? They feed them grain to get that intramuscular fat, because this is depositing all that energy. So we get that too. So you have someone who's eating a bunch of carbohydrates where they may look big, but that's all marbled fat. Mine is like that grass-fed cow. It's just lean. And so, someone else is going to be like Wagyu. Well, you may look bigger than me, but like you're not actually, as far as lean muscle mass is concerned. And also glycogen. Glycogen has a mass to it, and it can actually physically, fill these muscles up. And these things also, retain water. So you're getting fat, glycogen-filled, watery, bogged muscles. And so your pump is big. And I look so big. I look so huge. But it's just fool's gold. It's not real. And so when you're just eating, carnivore and so forth, all the gains you get are lean muscle mass. You're never going to have to cut that, so you bulk up and then you cut down. Like you're just fooling yourself, because, you're putting in a bunch of fat and glycogen and water into your muscles, and then it just goes away. And the whole time you're limiting your workouts too, because your body's not working as well as it should be. Your metabolism isn't where it's supposed to be. You're not giving your body this optimal nutrition for optimal performance. So it may look like you're doing better when you're eating carbohydrates, but in fact, you're shooting yourself in the foot.
This is great. So I purposefully will eat carbs for the puffiness look. Now, granted, I would love to know the key to success on how to not have to do that, but I have found so for me, I'm a small person, I'm 100 pounds. It's hard for me to sit down and just keep eating. So for me, my goal is to gain weight, gain muscle. So what would you, and I have a lot of followers and people who ask me this, how do I gain muscle? Now, my answer is eat more food and lift heavier, but I try to do that myself, and obviously it's a lot easier said than done, especially if we go on vacation or something like that and we don't have access to going to the gym. Then all of our muscle that we built for X amount of months disappears very quickly and we just become little sticks. So any tips on how to build muscle?
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, you're exactly right. You know, you do need to lift heavy, and you need to stimulate your muscles in your body to, rebuild, bigger, better, stronger. Definitely the best thing to do is obviously going to muscle fatigue. When you're pushing yourself into absolute failure. It's those last two sort of things. You get to 10, you're just kind of like, oh yeah, oh, that's really hard. I'll stop it there. If you can squeeze out 12, those 2 reps will make all the difference, and then you have to feed yourself. So again, after you finish working out, I always try to eat after I work out. I always just feel better when I train on an empty stomach. I've always, played better, trained better when I did that. And then so I'd eat until I was full. And then if I'm working out a lot, maybe the next morning, be like, ooh, I want to eat again. And so I'd have another steak or something like that. Generally, when I'm working out a lot, I double the amount of meat that I'm eating. So I might eat like 4 pounds, 5 pounds of fatty meat in a day. And that's if I'm lifting consistently. If I'm not, my body will just sort of switch back to about 2 pounds a day. And that's how much it takes to maintain me. But that's the thing. So you have to be conscious of that. Obviously you have to put in the work. It's not just going to happen on its own. It'll go to a certain extent, but you need to put in the work and to get past that. And then you need to recognize how much food your body wants, and you need to give it to it. So, I don't think you need to force feed yourself anything. I think your body will, ask for a caloric, abundancy, like on its own, if you're giving it the stimulus that it needs. I think that'll happen naturally, but you have to recognize the signals, and you have to be able to provide it what it needs to build more muscle.
You don't count calories or anything like that?
Never count calories. No, I never do. No. If you need a calculator to figure out what to eat, you're probably eating the wrong thing. Like you should just be able to eat. I think about, carnivore diet as more of what not to eat, as opposed to what to eat. Mm-hmm. It's great to eat more meat and fatty meat. That's great. But the trick is not eating all the other crap, because that's what really brings you down. And that's why I just feel amazing. And that, just that last 5% of going pure, I think makes, 95% of the difference. And, that's, and that's, what I say, I literally feel like a different breed of human, I just do. My body, compared to myself as a professional athlete on and off carnivore, my body just works differently. And so you just go as pure as you can. And then just, and then after that, you just hit the weights, and just push yourself, and how to push yourself. So that shouldn't be an issue. And it's just a matter of dedicating the time to be able to do that and then your body will take care of the rest. It will ask you for more food, and it will do the right thing with it. Like you'll be surprised. Like if you get pure, your body works entirely different.